I'm joined by Catherine Fransons, the head of Pemico's organizational change management practice. So when Pemico talks about organizational change management, what do you actually mean? And maybe you could distinguish that with how others often perceive OCM in the marketplace.
Yeah, for me, OCM is really, what I said before, is enabling the people to make the shifts in how they work to actually enact the change that we're looking for in the business. Those shifts can be anything from mindset shifts. So, moving away from a reactive firefighting culture to being more proactive and data-driven in their decision making. Those shifts can be upgrading their competencies and skills, learning new tools, moving away from data entry to, more automated processes and doing more analytics. So getting the skills to do that. Anything it takes to kind of move the people side of the project forward. And in a very pragmatic way that's tied back to the business drivers and the value of the project is how I view it. I think where that differs from other solutions in the market or where other methodologies can sometimes go astray is they can be very dogmatic in terms of a lot of checklists and things that you need to go through, but those in themselves don't necessarily drive the value that we're looking for, the changes that we're looking for. They can be useful tools, but they need to inspire insights that we can then use to help the business move to its next phase or its next evolution. On the other side of the coin, the other area where organizational change can go astray is keeping it too high level or too theoretical in terms of not making it practical, talking just about, how people address change and those types of things, but not giving practical solutions that the business can actually use and implement to make those changes happen. And so I think the value proposition that we have here at Pemico is that we've experienced practitioners who can see both sides, who understand how to use methodologies and tools and the knowledge of how people react to change, but use those in conjunction with the project and the project goals to have very practical applications that the businesses can easily implement that aren't onerous to help move their workforce to where they need them to be.
And our view of the world, Catherine, is that OCM should be an embedded, integral part of a transformation lifecycle of the entire program, not something that gets dropped in at a certain point, and that there are different elements to it at different stages. So if we think of a typical client journey, they start off with a business problem that is currently not being solved by their current processes and systems. They go through a form of transformation assessment, a business requirements assessment. That may lead into projects to go to market and select the right solutions and integrators, followed by the implementation and deployment of that, all with the goal of realizing some defined measure of transformative business value. So what I want to do is I want to unpack this a little bit, and let's start at the front end assessment piece. What does OCM look like during the assessment phase?
Well, there's a number of things. Actually, the assessment phase is probably one of the most important times to bring in OCM. So first of all, as you're assessing where you have gaps and how you're going to fill those gaps, there are technology gaps, there are process gaps, there are also people gaps. So we need to know where we need to upskill people, where we need to shift mindsets and build those into the overall solution. Right? Having a shiny new ERP system isn't going to drive change if everyone in your organization just pulls data out of it and goes back to using their Excel spreadsheets. So that's the first thing we need to understand, but we also want to look at this a little more broadly. We want to understand how the organization deals with change at a general level, what their change capacity is. So are there 30 other projects going on in the organization at the same time? How do we pace these? How do we stagger these? And what has been the past experience with change, right? If you have an organization with a lot of failed projects, it's very hard to get buy-in on your ERP project because people just don't believe it's going to come to fruition. So those are things we need to know early on so that when we build out the plan, we can address them. We can work with some of the other priorities in the organization to stagger rollouts, those types of things. Measuring the change maturity and change capacity of the organization is imperative to coming up with the right sort of plan moving forward, the right implementation scope, etc.
Yeah, so when we come in and do an assessment and we're helping our clients decide among options to figure out what plan to pursue and how to pursue it, of course, a critical piece of helping our clients put together something that's going to deliver business value require an ability to handle what the program's going to be throwing their way. Not in theory, but in practice. So we have to make sure those things line up so that the plan can be executed and the value can be realized. If we fast forward to the next phase, client's going to go to market and pick the right solutions. In your view, you've always said this is a great time for the organization to start putting in some of the fundamentals in parallel. So what type of OCM work do you actually run in parallel with selection projects to make some of these changes and some of these initiatives tangible?
Right. Well, there's a number of things. I mean, first of all, selection is where you're first engaging your stakeholders. You're often bringing in large portions of the organization to help with the assessment and evaluation of the different tools. So there's a couple of things that are important. One is communication, right? For them to effectively provide that evaluation, they really need to understand the drivers of the project. Why are we looking at this? What are we trying to get out of it, right? What do we want to change? Not just, is this going to match our current processes today? So to have an effective evaluation, we need that communication and almost that training. So we need to set up the key messages, the key change drivers, and the case for change of the project at this stage to make that successful. We also want to ensure we have adequate engagement, meaning that we're building the mechanisms to have two-way communication with our stakeholders. The fact of the matter is, it's very rare to have a unanimous agreement from all aspects, all functions of the company on which of the providers or tools are going to be the best one going forward. They all have sort of trade-offs and strengths and weaknesses. And so if you don't address that change and allow people to have a voice, but then also circle back to explain the rationale behind your decisions, you're actually starting your implementation with a subset of your stakeholders already resisting it because their choice wasn't selected. So you want to manage that change very carefully. So selection's a key time to build those key messages, to talk about the drivers, and to build those integral two-way communication mechanisms with your stakeholders.
And there are other things that we've seen. There are critical dependencies on an ERP project. So business functions are going to change, job descriptions are going to change, roles are going to change. And in many cases, we help our clients set up central services or standard business procedures. And we have to stand up entirely new departments and functions, help our clients figure out what those things look like from an organizational design perspective, and make sure that they are filling those positions in time for the implementation demands. So there's all these parallel projects, like Catherine's suggesting, to get the organization ready and prepared for implementation, both from a readiness perspective, from an engagement perspective, as well as to get the organization itself aligned to enable some of those changes through implementation. Now, once implementation starts, how does PEMICO support organizational change management? And how do we do it in a way that's actually rolling up our sleeves and perhaps not staying as high level as some might perceive?
Our goal is to make ourselves useful at every level of the project, right? To really embed ourselves in the project, understand your project more closely with the project appointed OCM team, whatever that might look like for each particular organization. But it's not just providing, some tools and templates or even just some high-level advisory. We're really in there going through the process with our clients, providing those additional insights, but building the capability within their organization as we do so. I mean, we certainly do bring tools, templates, and methodology with us. But like I said, we want to make sure that every solution's fit for purpose for that particular organization. We get to know the organization very, very well and work at that day-to-day hands-on level with the team to make sure that we're implementing these tools in the best way for their fit in their organization.
And when we come in and step into the OCM role, particularly with many of our mid-market clients, many of our clients don't have the people or the capabilities to handle many of the day-to-day requirements that organizational change management demands. So oftentimes we're supplementing their teams with experts, even to the more functional and technical roles of training material development, learning management systems administration, and so forth. So from strategy all the way down to execution, we support where the requirements pull us. Now, change management doesn't stop at implementation. In fact, a huge value driver of the change management is helping to assure adoption post go live. So talk about some of the change management that we provide once clients have gone live in their new systems.
Absolutely. In fact, I would almost argue it's this post go live is where the rubber really hits the road and where we really need to get involved. And that's really aligning with the support teams, understanding where there's gaps and issues, but also being present and on the floor with the actual end users, understanding what's working, what's not working, where there are barriers, and then bringing that all the way up to the leadership to understand it at their levels as well. And so often what we do at this point is a lot of follow-up and workshops. What's working, what's not working, where do we need to make tweaks, what's preventing you from moving forward, and that could be identifying additional training that's required or additional support type sessions. It could be bringing back issues around processes. It could be looking at a group that is really struggling organizationally because they're not getting strong leadership in their area and working with those leaders to help build that alignment and get the team reorganized the way it needs to. Again, you mentioned a lot of implementations involve organizational changes, so helping teams gel and mesh. So the activities can be, again, it depends on the organization, what changes they're experiencing and how they're structured, but working with those teams and tracking with solid metrics. Are we actually achieving our objectives? So understanding those KPIs and not just sort of taking a good, yeah, things are going good for granted, but really measuring, are we achieving our benefits, and then digging in to make sure that we're doing the right things to continue to enable those as we go forward.
Catherine, we've covered a lot of great ground here, a lot of great topics on organizational change management. If there's one soundbite you'd like to leave business leaders with, what is it?
I think it goes back to what we were saying at the very beginning. Change is fundamentally getting people to do things differently and enabling them to do so. And that can be enabling them through the right technology and the right processes, but it's also identifying all the shifts that they need to make in mindset, in approach, and in competency. And so change management, as we said at the very beginning, is not about fluffiness or making people feel good about the change. It is about driving bottom line value, and you won't get the value without addressing the people side of the change.
That's an excellent point, and we'll wrap there. Catherine, always a pleasure and a great discussion. Look forward to more with you.
Thanks, John.